On today's show, two of the top domain brokers in the world discuss the idea of off the market forever, an increasing dilemma that companies are seeing as they try to acquire domains for their startup, for their new brand, for their marketing campaign. We discuss the carrying cost on a domain, the opportunity cost. We also get into why founders in hustle mode don't see or understand domain name values and the scalability problem that they create in that process. Enjoy the show. First, serious about online trading? Secure your funds, keep your merchandise safe, and use a company that keeps the buyer and seller protected the whole way through. That's escrow.com. Payments you can trust.
It's built by domain investors to increase your inquiries, sales, and profit. Forget spreadsheets and archived emails. Manage your entire investment portfolio in one place using a secure and completely confidential platform. Learn more at ft.com. That's EFTY, ft.com.
Hey, Sherpa Network. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Tess Diaz, executive producer of DomainSherpa.com. Today, we're joined by Drew Rosener and Chris Zuiker, brokers with Media Options. Hello, brokers. How you doing?
Awesome.
Very good.
Delighted. Yeah, likewise. So, we've been talking at Media Options about how we've reached a tipping point in the single most important economy on earth, the digital economy. Drew, you keep using a hashtag on Twitter. Love your tweets, by the way. Always entertaining and informative. But you have this hashtag you use, off the market forever. That really is an increasing dilemma. Let's talk about what you mean by that. It's about supply and demand with premium domains. Give us an overview. What do you mean by off the market forever?
Yeah, so it's funny. I don't even, it wasn't even that long ago, a year ago or something, somebody mentioned a domain sale on Twitter, and I just thought, wow, there are so many companies that should own that domain, and they're not even aware of the opportunity that they just lost. And I just remember thinking, like, these guys, they don't even know this domain, the domain that they probably had always made the assumption that, oh yeah, we'll get that someday. Like, it's not a priority in this quarter. It's not, it's not in our budget this quarter, or that means we could hire another engineer, or whatever it is. There's always an excuse. It's never the perfect time, right? This is a capital expenditure, and it's part of doing business. You want to create a sustainable business, a sustainable brand. You need to invest in the proper assets, and domain names is foundational to the digital economy. It is.
I love that hashtag.
Yeah. So the point was, I started using the off the market forever because I don't think there's a better way to say it. It's like, hey, you had all these assumptions about when you were going to get this domain. You kept kicking the can down the road, and now it's gone. And the thing is we're seeing the velocity of that happening just go parabolic, right? So we're seeing, I don't know, Chris, 30% of our business maybe is domain acquisitions, 30, 40% acquisitions for companies. And those are getting increasingly more difficult because, it used to be like, here's 100 domains for you to choose from that are just great names, or, here, your budget's this. Well, here's 10 or 20 names that will fit in that budget, but still great names. That's not possible anymore. In most cases, companies that are looking to be, the next unicorn, and not that, but if you want to be somebody, you want a global audience, or you want a nationwide audience, you need a big brand. You need something that you can grow into. If you get, put a prefix or a suffix on it, or you diminish your brand. Chris, what do you call it?
Which one? The raw, unfiltered version of your brand?
Exactly. That's it. The raw, unfiltered version of your brand with a .com
match
on the end of it. There is no better asset for brand protection, period. In my opinion, and I am not an attorney, if you own the bangon.com version of your domain name, of your brand, trademark's really important for a whole bunch of reasons. But in terms of having the mind share online, when people think of your brand, the keyword around your brand, the essence of your brand, there's no more powerful tool than just owning the .com.
So,
and that's getting harder, and it's getting increasingly harder. And it's not getting like incrementally harder, it's getting exponentially harder.
So Drew, I think what we're dealing with here, we're dealing with supply and demand, right? So we were talking about the supply for quality domain names is I can say vanishing, going into vaults, is being locked away. Are there coming brands? There's competition. I mean, as the world moves to more online and more businesses move solely online, the supply and demand thing. I think, you could take this conversation many different ways, right? You can take it from the marketing side, right? So, hey, we're talking to brands here, to companies saying, listen, it's off the market forever. So they see the risks and the rewards to their brand, but also you're talking to like domain investors here. We're talking about the supply and demand curve and like how to price your domain appropriately. I think this conversation really talking about the marketers, right, Drew, or
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't even think we need to extrapolate. I think it's such a fundamentally simple principle. And for whatever reason, some of the smartest people in business fail to grasp it. And
so you two, pardon me, are the brokers for Media Options, which is the 5 years running, the top brokerage company in the world. You sell domains, acquisitions and sales, almost exclusively for end users, not for domain investors. So basically, you spend all day, every day talking to end users, and you're seeing a shift, a tipping point, a change. I mean, supply and demand has always been a problem with domains, right? 676 of the two-letter, right? .com.
Right.
Well, supply and demand's always been a problem. It's just that we're shifting up the curve, right? We're just much further along the supply and demand curve than we were 10 years ago, and that is getting really, really, really interesting. I thought of an analogy the other day. We recently came to Lisbon, and in the Lisbon real estate market, you ask yourself, when you arrive here, it's a magical city. It's an amazing place. Anybody who's ever wanted to come to Lisbon, there's a great reason to come in June for NamesCon. See you there. But the real estate market here it's very interesting. You've got these absolutely incredible buildings. You've got the second oldest city in all of Europe. It's older than Rome. People don't realize that. This is the only city older in all of Europe, older than Lisbon, is Athens. And so it's truly an incredibly unique city. The topography is similar to San Francisco, but obviously the architecture is extremely different and far better. And you sit here, you walk through the streets, and you think to yourself, well, what a great place. The weather's perfect. The food is great. The people are kind. I don't understand. Why is this the cheapest capital city in Europe? None of these things that make Lisbon great, none of the things that make Lisbon great have changed. The food's always been good. The people have always been kind and humble. The architecture has always been beautiful. The streets have always been of cobblestones, and there's, the main factor, the beaches have always been beautiful, right? The sunset's always been falling into the ocean, and, there's always been 300 days of sunshine. So none of that has changed. But the market has gone up by 300% in the last 5 years. And so you ask yourself, why? What triggered that, right? Why all of a sudden did the Lisbon real estate market go from mediocre, not even sub-mediocre at best, to absolutely booming? One of the hottest real estate markets in the world, even though it's still cheaper than most other European cities. You're asking yourself, why? What was the trigger to set off the market trajectory? And why, where are we in that curve, right? Like, It's very scary to think,
Right.
the market went up 300% in the last 5 years. It's bound for a correction, but I don't think so. Now, we're purely speculating on Lisbon real estate here, but I don't think so, and it directly relates to domain names.
Excellent.
I don't think so because in the last 5 years, what has happened? What's the answer to that question that you're asking yourself? Well, they took off rent controls, okay? Let's just call it regulatory changes, okay? These previously socialist policies that were very protectionist to the renters, particularly the elderly, have been removed or made far more lenient, more capitalist, and so more free market. And so what happened? Foreign investment came flooding into the market. And if you're like me and you can live anywhere in the world as long as you've got an internet connection, and you're going to all these different cities, and we travel frequently, and you're thinking to yourself, well, is this a place I could live? Is this? And we've been doing that for years now, thinking about what's next. And Lisbon wasn't even on our radar. We landed here, and I can tell you there's not a better quality of life in the world. And right now, right, time and place. And I think it's the best value, right? So I think, no, we're not headed for a correction just yet. At some point, it'll obviously slow down. But it's going to keep going up because suddenly the market has, the blinders have been taken off the market. These policies and there were outside factors influencing, depressing the market. And I think the same is can be said for domain names in many, many different ways. But
tell me a few ways how that's the same with domains, Drew.
Okay, so one of the ways that's glaringly obvious in the last 12 months is people's sudden distrust of social media, right? And so suddenly you had all these brands, and I remember it all. I think I even said this before. It started with Absolute Vodka, and they may not have been the first, but they're the first ones on my radar. And I was driving, I was in Boston, I saw a billboard, and at the bottom of the billboard, and nowhere on that billboard did it say absolutevodka.com, or maybe they own absolute.com, I don't even know. But they didn't reference any piece of intellectual property that they actually own. They only reference a Facebook page. And I thought, even my uneducated, I hadn't dug into this at all at that point. I just thought that doesn't feel right. You're a huge company, a huge brand, and you're putting your own advertising dollars behind promoting a third-party brand that doesn't benefit you in any way unless you're a shareholder of Facebook. So it just immediately didn't make sense to me, right? But that was the trend, and it continued, and it increased. And then, boom, it suddenly blew up. And what we've been preaching for years became incredibly obvious to many people. It still needs to work its way through many more. But it was like, if you don't own your touch point with your customer, you don't own your customer. You don't own their data. You don't own the relationship. You don't own anything about them. And you're spending 100%. The cost of customer acquisition is 100% yours, but the relationship and the data now belongs to a third party.
Yeah.
In what circumstances does that make any business sense?
It's horrible. I mean, I've heard it say that it's traffic you control versus traffic that you own. And and that I've actually talked about that quite a bit. This thought of authenticity, right? Are you authentic? Do you, like today, we evaluate, there's the great study by Reese and Reese. I need to buy it again by the book. There's another book they have coming out, but it talks about positioning and leadership, and really, like, I'm on this kick with authenticity. Like, do you look authentic?
Yeah.
So I mean, actually, I took it a different way. Okay, back to your point, like the direct response marketing. Do you control it or do you own it? Right. But I think it comes back to authenticity. I mean, people are getting kicked off the social media. I think that's where you're going with that. And the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even just so you've got these people being completely just deplatformed, right? There's a word that didn't exist 5 years ago. Okay, so you've got all these people being deplatformed, right? And that sets off alarm bells, right? Because even if you're not a controversial brand or controversial figure, bless you, Tess, that still sets off the alarm bells.
Right,
it's like,
right.
Oh my God, I don't own this image that I thought I had. You've got people making millions of dollars on Instagram and on Twitter and Facebook. And it's like, that's great, but I hope you're making hay while the sun shines and not spending it all on Lamborghinis, because one day your number is going to get called, or it could. And so, with domain names, it is the only piece of digital property you own where you make direct contact with your customer.
So as we look at supply and demand, right? Once a company, since we primarily work with end users, right? Once a company vets a domain as intellectual property, it's often counterintuitive to ever let it go. I mean, once you've acquired a domain or you've acquired a company that has a number of domains, then it's already vetted. And letting it go, I mean, it's just $10 to renew it every year. And it's
risk
not
and reward, yeah.
Well, no, but hold on. You're evaluating that wrong.
okay.
You've got a great domain name that you've inherited through the acquisition of a company. And yeah, it's easy to say, oh, well, it costs $10 a year to renew. But this is actually exactly the wrong mindset that folks have. It's, well, it's only going to cost me $10 a year to keep it. No, that's wrong.
Yeah, I know you're going.
You're not taking into account the opportunity cost. You're a company, you're not using this brand. When you come up with a new product or service that you want to launch, yes, sure, it might be easy to go out and use this brand, but it's probably not the exact perfect brand for that new product or service you're going to launch. And the carrying cost of that domain is not $9 or $10 a year. The carrying cost of that domain is the opportunity cost of the capital that you could receive from the sale of the asset. So you're much better off if you got a portfolio, you got a bunch of phenomenal domain names, as many corporations do, sitting in their vaults, as Chris mentioned earlier, which is where many of these domains live. You're better off bringing them to market, getting them in the hands of the best user, right? Further developing the market, creating this more liquid and understood market, because ultimately usage, right? It doesn't matter what we're talking about. Usage is what creates education and understanding, and that's what we need. And so a bunch of these domain names tied up in domain investor portfolios, corporate portfolios. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not a pot calling the kettle black here, right? We are a domain investor as well. We wear many hats. If you're a corporation, you're not in the speculation business. That's not what your shareholders are owning your stock for.
Yeah.
You have an asset that can be monetized. So if that asset's worth $1 million, let's just use that for easy numbers, your carrying cost of that domain name is not $9 a year. Your cost of that domain name is whatever your company's return on capital is, or is your company leveraged? Are you borrowing money? Well, instead of borrowing that money at whatever X percent you're paying in interest, you're paying that same amount of interest on the $1 million in value that's tied up in that asset that's not being monetized, right? Your company's probably already written this off in terms of accounting purposes through depreciation. It's just dead weight on your books, and you can monetize it, and that's a far better use of the capital than
right.
So this is evangelistic and an encouragement. However, it sounds like with your off-the-market hashtag, that's not what you're actually seeing or experiencing. Chris, I didn't mean.
So actually, I guess part of my prophetizing about domain names is working on both ends of that spectrum, right? It's like I believe that domain names have not reached anywhere close to what their full enterprise value should be. I think that the real enterprise value of these names is 5 or 10x what the market recognizes today, maybe even more than that. And so, I'm fighting to create tools and methodologies to help the market, help investors understand what the value of these names could be. And then at the other end of the spectrum, even though, yes, I'm saying I think these domains are going to increase in value. Yes, I think they're very valuable, but they're not valuable if they're just tucked away in a corporate portfolio.
Yeah, that was an important point. That was a very important point.
If you're not using these domains, then it's not creating value because you're not in that business, right? Your shareholders own shares of your company because they expect you to do the business that you're in. They expect a certain return on capital. And if you are borrowing capital particularly, or issuing new stock or issuing bonds, you're better off selling the domain and using that capital, because there is a high opportunity cost to carrying.
Right. Well, and I guess to your point.
As we bring those two ends of the spectrum together, we get to, then we get a real free market. We get a true market pricing, liquidity. When we get here to the middle, that's where the magic happens. That's where this becomes a real industry.
But that's not happening yet, right? So I want to focus on.
But we're at the tipping point where I believe we've suddenly started moving towards that point again.
That's
we were
a big deal.
stalled between, I would say, 2008 and 2015, 16. We were sort of stalled. And now, in the last couple of years, now we're seeing movement. We're starting to get back on track towards, arriving at that nucleus.
Okay, Chris, in your conversations with startups doing acquisitions or divesting assets for companies, what are you seeing about, this idea of domains being locked in a vault off the market forever?
Okay, so this just happened to me last couple of weeks. We were brokering a domain name, and there were several brands that had an interest in this domain name, and we sold it. During the negotiation process, we try to educate these companies on that, because once they are sold, they are rarely sold again, because they become brands and they become assets, right? And there's this thing called brand equity. And I talk a lot about brand equity, how the domain name becomes more than just a domain name once the company brings life into it, and it takes over the life, and becomes part of that brand. Okay, so they come back. This person came back about a month later, said, "Hey, is that domain still available?" And I was like, "No, it's sold." And that situation probably happens, I don't know, maybe once a month, once every other month, where domains were broken. They come back and say, "Hey, is that still available?" It happened on quite a few it happens all the time.
It happens all the time on the brokerage side. And then I see it even more on the owned and operated portfolio. We've got companies that have been reaching out. I'll even make a prediction here on the show. I'll use stanza.com. Now, STANZA.com. Stanza.com. Okay, we've owned it, I don't know how many years, a bunch. Most people would overlook that domain and be like, it's like I think it's Italian for space, like a place,
right.
or a room or something. And recently, there's been a whole bunch of companies called Stanza that have popped up, and they all reach out and they all make some lowball offer, and I say appreciate it, but that's not in line with what we're asking. And they say, okay, well, let me know when the price changes, and I just kindly reply back that okay, but I in all honesty, I think the price is probably going to change in the other direction.
Direction.
And and I'm not, I'm not trying to threaten you, but truly, every new company that pops up, it's probably adds a couple $100,000 in value to that domain. It's now we're up to 3, 4, 5, 5 venture capital backed startups that, have raised, millions of dollars, some of them tens of millions of dollars. And it's I'm sorry, I didn't, but every time one of these pops up, the traffic increases. Every time it pops up, we're getting more emails. We're getting
because they're building equity in it.
If I own a building, if I own an empty plot of land, and all of a sudden Amazon announces they're going to build their headquarters next door, sorry.
So Drew,
I'm not going to sell it for what I was going to sell for a month ago. I'm going to sell for, now Drew, the value's way more.
I use this analogy, right? So, there's some words that just have inherent equity, right? Like a quilt.com, like quilt. It's just the amount of searches that are done, the CPC that's there, okay? That has this equity that's just there by default of the keyword.
Yep.
There's other ones like you're talking about that have that. Okay, they have the equity built in, but then that equity is then is
magnified
into the sale because these companies are investing in it. They're calling themselves that same keyword.
Yep.
And so they're by default elevating the price and elevating the worth of that domain. So that's why when you're saying, listen, it's going to go up. It's going to go up because the inherent like conversation that's taking place behind that keyword.
It's
and
really,
just to go back to the,
hold on, let me just make a point. The formula that I like to give these guys is, look, how much money are you going to spend in branding and marketing this year? Okay, you're going to spend $1 million. Great. At that, you alone, your company, you're going to spend $1 million in branding and marketing. You alone are going to increase the value of my domain by between $100,000 and $200,000, because between 10 and 20 cents of every dollar you spend in branding and marketing is coming to the mind share of my.com.
Right.
And so, you know, I don't know what to tell you. You're increasing the value of my.com. I'm not increasing the price. You're increasing the value.
and it's just like people are beginning to understand, if they're doing that with Facebook, they're sending all their traffic, their mind share to Facebook. They're
Look
doing
what they've done. They've turned Facebook into one of the biggest companies on earth.
Yeah, great example, Tess. Yeah.
It wasn't, yeah, exactly. It wasn't consumers. It's literally the exact same analysis, the analogy. It wasn't the consumers, it was the businesses. They made Facebook so valuable.
Right.
They said, oh, we're going to give you 10 or 20 cents on every dollar that we spend in branding and marketing. It's like, and Facebook's just going, oh, thank you. You know, we just wanted to be a website for college kids, but.
Well, okay. So let's talk examples here. I recently interviewed David Clements. He talked about the sale of ice.com, ICE.com. It sold for, well, into the 7 figures for within under an hour, I believe, when it came to market. And they had about 7 companies all scrambling to bid on it. Same thing, off the market forever. They always thought they could get it someday, or they hadn't bothered with an outbound acquisition. And suddenly they heard it was on the market. I mean, it's a lot to move 7 figures and make that decision in an hour or less. I feel like there was a 42-minute mention. I mean, it was quick. And that's the key. You know, that interview, I talked about the importance for any corporation to have a relationship with a domain name broker. But for this interview, it's about off the market forever. Not proactively looking for it, not being prepared to get it when that moment arises for you. And, you know, the Intercontinental Exchange is never, ever, ever going to sell ICE.com now that they have it. So all the other companies who are bidding, it's over. They'll never get it.
Game over. That's it. And you can just, all they get, you can hear the proverbial jaws drop, just like, you know, and I get those emails once in a while. Like I remember very vividly when we sold ch.com. Again, I think I've talked about this before, but it was just like, you know, was it CH? Yes.
I've heard this one.
Yeah, it was. It was ch.com, and it was that Carolina Herrera, you know, came back and was like, well, what do you mean that it's sold? That's our domain. And it was like, no, I've been trying to tell you that I'm selling it, and if you want it, you should buy it now because it's going to sell. And once it's gone, that's it. It's off the market forever. And they just couldn't get it. They didn't get it. They were like, coming back with all these different things, and it was like, you know, and the stupid thing of all of it is that he did get it. You know, he just didn't know he got it, because in the end, when it did sell, he came back and he said, what do you mean? That was our domain. I said, but it wasn't your domain. In your mind, you're CH. In your mind, you are CH. Right.
Well, that's kind of sad.
It is sad, because I was like blowing off the other buyer, because I was like, guys, you are Carolina Herrera. Every retail store you own, every bag, every pair of jeans says CH all over it. Okay, like you are CH. You need to own Carolina. You need to own CH.com. I mean, it's like it's obvious. A monkey knows that. But he didn't get it. He didn't get it, and he probably should have lost his job. I hope he did, because he was just. But I don't know. That's not true. I don't wish that on anybody. But what I do know is that marketers need to wake up, because that is what happens. Is suddenly you thought Carolina Herrera has some magical right to ch.com, and then suddenly a Chinese airline thought ch was close enough to mean China, and suddenly ch.com is Spring Airways. Off the market forever, right? Like CH, as far as online is concerned, as far as the digital world is concerned, CH no longer represents Carolina Herrera.
Yeah.
Period.
So fund.com recently sold. Chris, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, I'm on mute. I think it's just the same thing Drew's saying, is that there's a lot of companies that have invested in their brand, but once it's gone, I mean, it's gone forever. And I use this analogy that most companies, they're seeing a return, right? So I mean, they get to a certain level, they have investments in, and they're seeing maybe they're putting $1 into marketing and seeing $1.20 back. But it's not until the realization that another company comes in and acquires that domain and puts marketing behind it, and all of a sudden they're seeing their ROIs go down. They're getting calls from investors saying, "Hey, why aren't you, like, what's happening? Our scaling is not working. Like, we're not able to scale because we've created this confusion in the brand." So if you look at fund.com, how many companies have fund, like, had the opportunity to own that? And obviously, once again, it's gone forever. I mean, that brand now has the raw version, the clarity, the simplicity that brand brings. And I think that's really if I had to take away one thing from this video today, is that don't miss the opportunity, right? So we're talking about that gone forever is really, it's that wake up call for brands and companies to say, you're not going to have forever. There's going to come a time when that's going to sell. There's going to come a time it's going to impact your brand, right? So I talk about the 7 dimensions, done several interviews on this. The 7 dimensions to a domain name, right? So it's global positioning, industry positioning, it's branding, it's marketing, it's SEO, it's email, and it's the ability to pivot and to expand beyond just maybe one area, right? So it was Zen Payroll, went to Gusto because, the payroll, it was Zen Payroll, that was their brand. It limited them to what they could do, so they rebranded to Gusto. Okay, one example that's out there. There's many other examples. But I think that's the big takeaway for me when this is that there is a supply and demand. Once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, I have a list here that I keep, and I talk about that as I'm researching, of brands that will never own their brand. So Octane.com versus Octane Lending, right? Ladder Life versus Ladder Capital, which raised $80 million. Alice versus Alice.co. Something, they raised $2.5 million, right? Catalyst versus Get Catalyst. So I mean, all these brands that are out there that are trying to say, hey, we're this brand, but there's confusion in there because a lot of them don't call themselves Get Catalyst. They call themselves.
And if they ever want to upgrade, they have to look at an entire rebranding process. Yeah. Chris, you were telling me earlier.
But why would see, like, why do you want to upgrade, right? So I mean, that's like, you want to upgrade because you want to create clarity and simplicity, and you want to create this effortless path through brand. Like, no one looks and says, "Man, Apple has Apple.com." You don't say that. You're like, it's the completeness of who they are, right?
Yeah, it's of course they own it.
Every major brand owns. Yeah.
If you can look at me with a straight face and tell me that Apple would be where they are today if they owned GetApple.com, if their domain name was GetApple.com and there was some software as a service startup that had Apple.com, if you think for 1 second that Apple would be the monster company that it is today, then I've got a bridge to sell you.
Yeah. Well, it's authenticity, Drew. It's authenticity, it's clarity, it's email, it's security. I mean, these are all real things that go into owning.
But most startups think that they can be Get Apple, and then later on, once they've made all the money that Apple made, then they can buy Apple.com. Okay. Chris, you were talking to me earlier about a domain that we cannot divulge.
Yes.
That you were trying to acquire. It is a 6-letter.com. They only it's a one word that everybody knows and can spell. They only refer to themselves, much like CH, they only refer to themselves as or much like the Intercontinental Exchange has always called themselves ICE. So this company asked you to do an acquisition, and I want to talk about that.
So I mean, in this example, this acquisition, they what happens is that companies start the branding process without domain names. Okay, so they start the branding process. So we're going to call ourselves this. We can get or try or be or use or whatever.
How old is this company?
It's not that old. So maybe in the last 5 years. Okay.
Okay.
So,
and how much money have they raised, or how much capital do they have?
Maybe $20-30 million.
Okay, so $20-30 million invested over 2 to 3 years in marketing their brand, creating their entirety of their being. And 2 to 3 years in, $30 million later, They reach out to the top broker in the world to acquire their domain name. And what happened?
So what happened is that it's the company that owns it is not going to sell it. I mean, they're not going to release that, so they're not going to have the opportunity to acquire this domain name, right?
Okay, and so it's owned by a company.
Yes,
so
owned by
another
a very
end
large
user
company
who's probably vetted the intellectual property, has an intention for it, maybe. And what did they tell you? They told you not for any price.
Pretty much. Yeah. Not for any price. One of those examples but see, that's why it's important to start the branding process with what's available. And and I think to Drew, your point is like, it may not be available. Now I've got a theory, Drew. You're going to like this theory. Okay.
Okay.
You're going to want this may get a heated discussion going on here. So the latest thing that I've been thinking about and really developing, I do a daily podcast, and part of that is just to think and get through things like authenticity. But one of them was one of the reasons why domains founders don't see this opportunity, right? And why we need to continue to educate and to communicate this is because most founders start off in hustle mode. Like hustle mode is like, I'm just out there. I'm trying to get this off the ground. I'm trying to do whatever I can take. I'm trying to save money. I'm trying to hustle, right? But it's not until they move from hustler to marketer to CEO that they say, wow, like my scaling, the ability to own my brand, the ability to position myself, the ability to really brand, to pivot, to expand our product offering is at risk. There's this massive risk that takes place that we're not going to be able, like we need to own and acquire our domain name, right? And so what I see is that founders that I've talked to that pass the opportunity and end up regretting it is that in the beginning they were in that maybe hustle mode. Now you can be in this hustle mode and have $30 million, $40 million. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the amount that you raise. And what happens is that serial entrepreneurs that have done this multiple times, they get it. They're like, listen, like they're beyond hustle mode. They're in marketing CEO mode. They're on like, okay, if I had limited resources, what would I do? How would I build it? Boom, I'm going to buy it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure where I was going with that other than the timing, other than like why brands like they pass on the domain names only to regret it later on because, it's gone forever. It's never going to be available again. Like you have to seize that opportunity and seize it.
I want to take it back to the Lisbon real estate market for 1 second, because I just think it's such a perfect analogy. Because the market has just been stagnant, it's been just very little appreciation, because if you can't increase rents, it's very difficult to increase prices or values.
Right.
And so, there were select pockets and particularly outside of the city, there was, some growth, but within the inner city of Lisbon, it was just, it was very stagnant. And so you had the Portuguese people that live here, that have been here for generations, that missed the boat when the market took off, because for them it was an assumption that if I've always loved that house a couple blocks away, but it'll be there 20 years from now and it'll be the same price.
Right,
so, or relatively speaking, right, the same value to me. And suddenly the market got away from them. And now it's a problem, right? Now it's a social problem, because now many Portuguese can't afford to rent or buy in the inner city of Lisbon. And so they're being pushed out, and rightfully so. They're pissed.
Right.
But the exact same mistake that startups and not just startups, but marketers in general, companies in general, who particularly have a dependence on e-commerce, or digital marketing, are making. It's the exact same mistake. They're just making that assumption that we will keep doing what we're doing. They're being rewarded by the market because VCs keep giving them money. Their companies are some kind of growth trajectory. They believe they're clever, even though they're losing money hand over fist. And ultimately, the money they're losing, or the money they're investing in to build that brand, is going in the goddamn toilet, because they're not putting that money into a foundational property that is the brand, that is the company.
Right.
Sold when they go out of business, because let's face it, something like 7 out of 10 of them go out of business. these domains, okay, you cannot make that assumption. You cannot think that you're clever and you're going to get away with putting a prefix or a suffix or some very, take away a vowel or, forget about it. Stop it. It's very simple, Yes, you've got this assumption that it'll be there when you're ready to buy it, but that is wrong. That's the point of today's conversation. You're wrong. Buy your brand now, not because I said so, but because it won't be there tomorrow, I promise you.
Because it's an exceptional scalability problem on top of being a marketing problem, a problem of where you're investing your assets, problem of recuperating those assets. I want to talk about, time is your enemy. How has the market changed in the past 5 years, and how is the market continuing to change? I mean, you've talked about, Drew, as the internet matures, so does the ability to quickly see value in domain names. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Actually, I think Chris said that, but nonetheless, time isn't your friend. And the way that the market's changed over the last 5 years is, what I said earlier. Like, I think up until 2008, from the very beginning, I think we're at the second tipping point. So from up to 2008, domain growth was, was crazy, but, values just kept increasing. And then we sort of stagnated and there was a lot of market confusion. And my take on it is that the primary reason for that is twofold. One is that parking as like a guaranteed income source for a domain owner started to go down. It's now sort of leveled off, and in some pockets it's increasing. But from 2008 until very recently, parking revenue was on the decline. Parking revenue as an assumed cash flow method has declined and all but gone away in the case of most domain investors, except for the certain core of the strongest portfolios. And that, the business world is very used to valuing a business, valuing an asset based on a cash flow projection. And so it was very easy for these companies to say, well, this domain is earning, $100 a day in domain parking revenue just from type-in traffic. It costs this guy $9 a year to keep this asset. For me to get that same return by buying a piece of real estate, I'm going to have carrying costs of X, and I've got to invest literally probably 10 times that amount to get the same cash flow, not return, but cash flow. And so it was very easy for companies to value these assets. It was, well, you want to buy this domain? Well, I'm earning, $5,000 a year. You're going to have to pay me 75 grand a year for the 75 grand for this domain. Because where am I going to invest my money and get a better return than what I'm getting right now, right? And so that was the way most people were valuing domains. It was a cash flow method. And then that kind of started fading out starting in 2008, and it all but was gone until, very recently. Then the second tipping point is now, the last 2, maybe 3 years. And for the reasons, that we discussed before, social media, changes with Google's algorithm, and the way that they treat domains, and, it may have devalued domains in one way, but they also increase the value on another hand. And the way that domains are being valued today is completely different. And it takes a decade for the market to shift, for them to say, okay, we're not valuing this on a cash flow model anymore. We're valuing this on how is this going to reduce my cost of customer acquisition? How is this going to increase my audience? And these are measurable things. These are things which can be measured. We don't possess all the tools today, but it's coming very, very, very quickly. And we've got great models that will get you within 10 or 20% of what the real value of a domain is. And then there's all these subjective factors, such as the velocity of internet growth, period, right? So as you can say, well, we say off the market forever, and some people say, well, yeah, but sometimes these things come back, and yes, that's true, but that's the exception, not the rule, and it's at a minimum usually a 10-year time frame before a domain could come back to market. Because if it was a startup, they launched, they're alive for a few years, they get acquired by a company. Most companies have a 5-year policy before they'll release a domain back into the wild. Even domains that they're going to let expire, they'll wait 5 years, because that's sort of the some of them are even more conservative, 7 years, 10 years. But they've got a period where they're going to lock that asset up, trademarks, domain names, because who knows, right? For whatever reasons. Each company's got its own reasons. But there's a pretty broad policy of company gets acquired, domains, get adopted. Right. It's tucked away for 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, and you won't see the light of day again, period. Okay? So you're talking about a minimum of 10 years before most assets are going to come back to the market. Minimum, and I would say it's the exception, not the rule, that they come back at all.
And during those 10 years, if you're still similar to that brand, you're losing the value of what you want to acquire.
Yeah, you're stuck. You're just stuck, period.
And you're losing. You've got to spend what you could have spent on the domain. You're spending it on more marketing.
Yeah. And if you're complaining about buying your domain from a domain investor, good luck getting that domain from IBM, who has, your offer just simply isn't going to move the needle, right? Like, they've got some internal policy that we don't sell domains that we adopt for 8 years, right? And I'm just making that up. I don't know exactly what their policy is. I think I did know at one point, but
it's off the market.
You think they're going to change that internal policy for you? Like, good luck.
Right.
Good luck. Do you know what that's going to cost you? And perfect example is DuckDuckGo with Duck.com coming from Google, right? It's like, that guy's been fighting with Google for years. His arch enemy, his arch enemy owned his .com domain name. Like, his whole marketing campaign is, we're not Google. We protect your data. We're not selling your data. We're not Google. Well, guess who owns your domain name? Google.
No, they bought it though.
Yeah, and we don't know for how much.
How many years?
But I can tell you right now, after the litigation that they got in, after all the embarrassing social media bullshit that they pulled.
Right.
Let me tell you something. They paid. I don't know if it was in money or blood, but they paid Google. I swear to you.
Yeah. There'd be no reason why that they would sell it.
Yeah. So,
and the loss of credibility. We're not Google. We care about your privacy. And yet they're like, you can't be a search engine and be so technically inept that the person or the company you're saying you aren't owns all your traffic, your brand, your consumers. It's just almost there isn't even a word for that. But maybe there will be in 5 years. What was the word you said earlier?
Deplatformed.
Yeah. We'll come up with a word here on DomainSherpa.
So, I think really it's really simple. We said at the beginning, it's supply and demand. There's nothing, we're not reinventing the wheel here, guys. It's supply and demand. It's just that because domain names are so niche, and because domain names are, unsexy to most people. It's funny though, once people get on board, once people understand the value of domains, all of a sudden it's the sexiest asset in the world. And why wouldn't it? You know what I mean? Like, I keep talking to my wife, like, how do we, we need to diversify and start investing in other things. And, we keep putting so much more money into domain names, and I'm not sure if that's a great idea, right? Like, we're too heavy in domains. And then it's like, let's go look at some real estate. And it's like, well, we can, you buy that building for $1 million. It'll generate, maybe, maybe it'll generate you 5% net, like net, like, let's be, people talk about net, after interest costs and after, whatever, like, you probably didn't take into account that time when, the washer on the third floor breaks and the plumber has to come and, a couple grand for the new washer and a broken pipe. Like, man, there's a lot of headaches, and I'm only going to get, well, I thought I was going to get 5%. Now I'm going to get 3.5%, right? So then it's like, well, buy a domain name, right? And it cost me $9 or $10 a year. And yes, again, you've got that opportunity cost of how much could you be earning on that capital elsewhere? Right now, it's pretty difficult to earn a return anywhere. And domain names got a 30-year track record of going nowhere but up in value. So,
right.
Why wouldn't it be a sexy investment, right? So once people do convert, once they come over to the dark side and they understand, they go, they have that light bulb moment. They go, whoa, these are awesome assets. Oh, wait, you mean I could buy that domain and really, that's not owned by the company you would assume it's owned by? And, but
do you
which increases the value? I think that's Tessa's question is as more and more startups, I talk about the three trends, right? So there's social, economical, technological, right? As the social trend picks up and more startups are only online, the demand's going up, right? Economically, more investors are understanding, more VCs are understanding that, hey, you really need to own it. And at Drew's point, it's when those two things, as they've gotten, they've increased, right? The amount of serial entrepreneurs, the amount of investors that understand that, and they get it. And your point, Drew, it truly is. It really is once you've done it once, you have to own it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's increasing the supply, and then the demand. Obviously, from a technological standpoint, they're just not available, right? Because they've sucked up, become brands. So you have the supply going up. Demand going up, supply coming down. It's the perfect equation.
Yeah, it's so funny when we see my favorite clients, right, are the guys that come in and they've already had an exit. They were a successful founder. They've had an exit, and they were on a great domain before, and they already understand the inherent benefits. The fact that just launching your business on day one with this amazing brand and .com to match it. It just puts wind in your sails. It's hard to explain, and there are lots of measurable data that we've talked about on here, but there is an intangible benefit to it. It puts wind in your sails. It makes you stand out to investors, to customers, to vendors, to your competition. And the other guy I love is the guy who launched on a crappy domain and had a bad outcome and realized the problems that he had, right? Those are the guys, there's no selling involved. The guy was sold the minute he came in the door. It was no, I have no prefixes, no suffixes, no .io. Just give me, this is my brand, and he's pissed off, right? Just let's buy it. Just figure out what it's going to cost and let's just get it done. He's not excited about it, but he knows because he's already felt the pain. One guy felt the pleasure, one guy felt the pain. Both of them arrive at the same conclusion. You need the best version. Now say, what is it, Chris?
Raw, unfiltered version of your brand.
Boom, with a .com on the end. There it is.
Exactly. Yep. Totally.
Now, Drew, you call domains niche. And I know in our experience discussing with end users, with marketers, they are. But when we look at something like when I interviewed Rand Fishkin, I was looking at, he's an SEO expert, SEM expert, but on his LinkedIn, he calls himself a marketer. And the reason for that is because whereas 90% of marketing is done online through SEO and SEM. So in the same way, that's what marketing is now. This is the single largest economy on earth, the internet, right? So why are domains so niche? It's like jingles and billboards, and they're not that niche for marketer or TV ads for marketers in the 80s. Do you think they're going to stay niche, or do you think the average marketer or the higher end marketer will expand their understanding of domain name values?
Well, no, I think, it's odd. We're seeing, education is increasing. It's not increasing at the rate I'd love, but it is increasing. And it's mostly not as a result of the domain community. I think we could be doing a lot more to better educate the public about domains. It's mostly the result of bad experiences. It's those people that, launched a brand with, a mediocre domain, and they either, bumped their head and said, oh shit, we can't grow anymore. We've sort of boxed ourselves in this domain name. Or, maybe it was a mission, it was a mission critical data security hole. Maybe it was, whatever. But the number of reasons that people come back around later is basically endless. But they all learn the same lesson. And it's, again, should have had that domain when I should have bought it when I had the chance.
Right.
They all learn the same thing. I mean, it's what Tess said it, right? The most important economy on the planet is the digital economy. And these are the foundation. This is the real estate of the digital economy. Domain names are internet real estate. And we just need the general public and the marketers to understand the tools that will help them understand the value. Because it's really, the disconnect is only that they just don't understand the value. Of course they don't want to pay, but they don't want to pay for their office space, but they have to.
Right,
okay?
right.
There's a free market for it. They don't want to pay for their, printer lease, but they have to because it's part of the deal.
That's
you need
a great
it.
point, Drew, yeah.
Nobody wants to spend the money, but you have to. And the fact is that people, they just don't know yet that they have to. And so our job is to help them, give them the tools to understand the value, to understand the necessity. And, so far, to be honest with you, I think the domain industry is doing a very poor job of that. But luckily, time and experience is doing our job for us. The last point I just want to make on that is, as the number of people, take it back to like the second sentence we said, which was, this is a conversation about supply and demand. So not only, in the US centric market, where you say, well, the economy is growing at whatever percentage and, the number of people going online are both, yeah, okay, but there's billions and billions of people. And it might not be that it's tomorrow that all those people come online, but over the next 10 years, they will. We're going to, I think we're going to have like more than 90% internet access saturation globally in a decade. And so like, I think today it's something like, I think we only hit half the population like recently. Maybe I could be talking out of turn, but it's something in that, order of magnitude. And so we're going to practically double the number of people online. We're going to probably more than double the number of businesses because, that's a known statistic that the number of brick and mortar businesses is decreasing and the number of online businesses increasing. People are buying more and more of the things that they buy on a daily basis online, not offline. And so the demand for domain names is only going to increase. And
you said it, Drew. It's the foundation. It's the foundation of it. Like you have to, yeah.
Yeah, like you think apps are going to replace domains? Oh, you think you're going to have a great app, and so you don't need a great domain? Okay, fine. We saw that happen. Apps are on the decline because at some point, when I've got 500 apps on my phone, I'm better off just going to the domain name than trying to find that stupid app. And more and more we're seeing companies are building web apps. And that web app lives on a domain. People access that app through their browser, not through a local app on their phone. Because you're limited with a local app, So every single time some new trend pops up, social media, apps, voice recognition, things pop up and people say, domains are dead. Rick Schwartz said it yesterday, I think. It's like, folks, listen, if you're watching this video, domains are going to still be here when you're dead, okay? I'd all but guarantee you that, right? If you're watching this video, when you die, there's still going to be domain names. Now, I guarantee you the way we interact with them will be different. The way we interpret them will be different. But the characteristics aren't going to change. Okay?
Their value is going to be different, but only in one direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, this is math, folks. I mean, it's like,
And
you only got so many meaningful, semantically meaningful domain names, right? And our point gets made even stronger by the folks who say, well, but voice recognition is going to kill the need for domain names. So what are you going to do? You're going to just be like, you're going to say, hey Siri, Apple. And she's going to be like, you want a new laptop? No, I wanted a fucking green apple. You know, like, you need a qualifier.
Yeah. Clarity, simplicity. It's going to have to be. Your brand still has to be effortless.
Yes,
it's got to be effortless.
Semantics. It's about semantics. You need to qualify what people are looking for, even if they're searching through voice. It doesn't matter. It's even more important if they're searching for voice, because the schmuck who thinks he's clever by dropping a vowel in his brand, that guy becomes irrelevant the day that we hit the tipping point where people are searching through voice and not through typing, because nobody's finding you, dude. Like, you drop all vowels out of your name.
I meant without the, like, how do you explain that? No, Siri. It's without the U.
Like,
no, Siri.
Clever, because I can trademark it. Genius, dude. Genius. You and your trademark, you don't matter anymore, because nobody can find you. Because when they talk to Siri, Siri's like, what are you talking about? You know, I don't know, power without the O and the E, or but no.
Well, but I think once again, it comes down to control versus owning, right? I mean, when you hand control over, when all you do is control the traffic, then it can be changed, right? One algorithm change and boom, it's done. A lot of examples on that. Fit Life TV was one. I mean, they almost went bankrupt because they built it all on YouTube.
Here's what I see happening with this voice recognition thing, because it's really a topic I love. I'd love to argue with people about. And it's like, you know, people are like, oh, but okay, so eventually, you know, as we hit a tipping point for voice recognition, you've got devices everywhere. Everything's got voice recognition. I'm interacting with the internet in a different way through the voice. And like, I will be able to bid the same way I bid in Google now for keywords. I'll be able to bid with Siri and say, if somebody searches for an Apple, Siri, take them to apple.com, right? Take them to my Apple store. Or somebody searches for a new wallet, like, you know, take them to Louis Vuitton. You're going to have brands, and everybody's going to be bidding for these keywords. Great. Okay. So what did Chris just say about owning versus controlling, right? Sure, you can control your brand. You can control some degree the traffic by paying a third party to get that traffic indefinitely, right? You are just opening up the faucet, and you are going to continue to keep spending and spending and spending, and all the money you spend on brand recognition, it's being diluted. Or you can own the best. What is it, Chris?
Raw, unfiltered version of your brand.
Boom. Let's say it together.
Simplicity, clarity,
Raw, unfiltered version of your brand with a .com on the end. And if you do that, right, if you're wallets.com, right, you're not competing anymore against Louis Vuitton, okay, for that wallet customer. The wallet customer who said, oh, I saw this wallet, it was a great, you know, this is a horrible example, but the point is, people will go to the .com. They're going to qualify their search if you do a good job, if you build a great brand, if you do your job properly, and you own that raw, unfiltered, best version of your brand with a .com, people will go to you. This is what type-in traffic is. This is what direct navigation is. And if you haven't noticed, it's a huge part of Google's balance sheet, right? Like a huge part of their earnings is as a result of direct navigation. So when people start talking to Siri, right, at scale and shopping and doing everything they do through Siri, you're still going to want to own your .com, and you're going to want to own it more than ever, because if you don't, you're still going to be paying a third party to get the person who wants to find your brand on your site, because otherwise somebody else is going to outbid you for that customer. And it's endless, right? It's a bottomless pit. It's just, you're going to keep spending and spending and spending. But if you, and where are you spending? You're spending with a third party, right? Now, you own thebestversion.com. You've created a great company. You've got a great product, great service. You're going to keep spending, but you're going to keep spending on your brand. You're going to keep investing to create a better customer experience, better customer service, better website, better data, better technology, reward your customers, lower prices, whatever. But you're going to be investing into your company, into your brand. You're going to be enhancing, you're going to be trying to make your brand better so that more people come directly to you instead of searching for the generic category that you're in, where you're just competing against everybody else and paying a third party for that traffic. There it is. I've said my piece.
Super exciting. Oh my goodness. Drew Rosener is done talking. A monumental moment. No, thank you guys. This was a super show. I think that we are entering this tipping point. It's fascinating to hear what is contributing to it, how hearts and minds are changing towards domains. I love, so many people call domain investors squatters because they just don't understand. It's the most uneducated thing you can say about the internet, in my opinion. And
well, it depends on who you're talking about. There still are quite a few squatters.
Okay. But I think I love this where you say, better to buy your domain from a domain investor than an end user. Good luck with that.
Exactly.
So I hope we reach a tipping point on that too. Not going to hold my breath, but I hope for it. So fascinating show, super interesting, raw, unfiltered brand, best version with your .com. Let's do it. All right. Thanks, guys. Sherpa Network. We'll see you all next time.
Cheers.